I watched this Manosphere documentary. This is called Inside the Manosphere. So you may have heard about this because everyone's talking about it on YouTube. And I actually saw a few people who were criticizing it, which I have some criticisms myself actually. It was like strangely disappointing, while being good. It was like quite good and entertaining, and yet at the end I was like, "That's it? What?" Now it's Louis Theroux, who is extremely well respected for good reason. He's a very talented documentarian. I actually haven't seen his. I don't believe I've seen his documentaries. But I've seen like clips, or I've seen things that I was like, oh yeah, I saw like, some clips when he interviewed Israeli settlers. And he's just as great at asking people hard questions and like waiting and letting them. He just has a good sense for not only what's true, but how to kind of hear people out and let people speak the truth, sometimes in ways that are shocking to themselves even. So yeah, he just has a very kind of neutral presence, even though he's confrontational and challenging in his own way. And so he's extremely skilled. I have a lot of respect for the way he carries on these interactions. And I think he's very, very good at drawing people out. First, some like, I guess, positive points or interesting points. So first, he interviews, this guy, a few other people who are like Manosphere influencers who like tell boys, hey, I can help you escape the matrix of like low paying jobs and unsatisfying life. And I can help you like rise to the level of being buff and having a lot of sexual partners and wearing nice things and, running a drop shipping scam, or I don't know. They all have different sort of things that they sort of do as their like get rich quick scheme. Often there's like a lot of, unregulated financial instruments, and stuff like that, rug pulls, different things. And so it's definitely playing off of like the way that boys and men are told that we have to be the provider, but then we're in a world where it's increasingly extremely difficult to do that for a lot of men. Obviously, not all men, hashtag not all men. But yeah, no one, you can't really deny the facts that like cost of living has gone up and up, and it's harder and harder for people to support themselves, let alone a family. And but yet the messaging is quite the same, that men and boys are sort of inculcated with this idea that you have to be the provider and anything else is a threat to your identity. Not all these manosphere people say that in the same way, but, there's a lot of other sort of mixture of stuff going on, but yeah, they sort of have this message. So Louis Theroux puts a lot of cracks in that message and helps us kind of see how vapid, vacant, empty, pathetic, lame it is. But like the kind of first key point, and maybe it's a really positive thing, but maybe it's the flip side of some of the flaws of the film. But like, Louis Theroux, from the beginning to the end, they're highlighting how he scares these Manosphere guys, how he's scary to them, and they don't really know who he is, but then they're like told by their fans and their viewers, oh, this guy is gonna roast you, or this guy really exposes people, and so they're scared of him. They're scared of this like older, calm, white guy. I don't know like what it is about him, but they're scared of how he just is like the sort of like to them he's like a judgment of, I don't know, like maybe like popular culture or a more mainstream world, but like not the type of mainstream world they're necessarily used to railing against. So he's a little bit of like a mystery. Like, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna hold my feet to the fire? And how am I gonna respond? And they're scared of him. And there's a lot of moments in the film where you can see him making them uncomfortable and sort of like mogging them, for lack of a better word, like masculinity wise, in the sense that like you just kind of see him like doming them. It's like, I didn't know how else to put it. Like it, sometimes I guess it's subtle, but it's really not subtle because the film opens with how scared they are of him. And then throughout the film, you're seeing Louis Theroux just be sort of what I would consider like masculine, like I don't really think about things in these terms very often, but like I talk about in my Breaking Bad video, like you want to have conceptions of masculinity, great. We have conceptions of everything. Understand masculinity as something, positive. For example, like maybe you don't have to be the provider for your family. Maybe it's okay to split bills, with your partner. Maybe it's okay to, accept help in various ways if you need it. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's okay to struggle sometimes while you're trying to be a provider, and it doesn't make you any less of a man or less of a person. And yet still, maybe what part of what it means to be a man is to be responsible. And and that's not a man versus a woman. That's more of a man versus a boy. I think the healthy masculinity is what separates men from boys rather than men from women. I don't think you can rationally be like, men are like this, women are like that. I think that gets you into like territory where you sound a little stupid, So I just, so I don't mean like, oh, men are supposed to be responsible and women aren't. Like, that's not, it doesn't make sense. That just doesn't make sense, But and okay, you want to talk about like emotion regulation. Okay, maybe masculinity, it's not about men denying their emotions. It's not about men not crying. It's not about men, refusing to seem weak. But maybe it is actually important to be confident. Maybe confidence is really good. I feel very confident as a person. My confidence comes from really assessing my internal motivations and my life and everything about myself, and coming to the conclusion that I like what I'm doing and I like how I am. And so I'm confident. I'm very confident. And confidence comes from doing good things and then being a rational person, as much as possible, and understanding, oh, I'm doing good things. I have nothing to be, I have nothing to be unconfident about, but generally I feel very confident. That's sort of what I get from Louis Theroux, is like he's completely confident. He's like, very calm and confident and self-assured. And he comes off very masculine in those ways, in a positive sense of masculinity. In the sense of, hey, okay, maybe men, maybe you don't have to like be a protector in the sense of you take it on as your entire identity that like you have more agency than other people and you help protect them. But maybe it's okay to, care about the feelings of the people around you. Maybe that's part of being a protector, is like, being aware of other people, being attentive to other people. He interviews like Myron Gaines, the fresh and fit guy. And Myron's ex, so his partner at the time, who they've since broken up, is there, and she's clearly uncomfortable with the interaction. But after the interaction, Myron's like, "Oh no, she was fine." It's like, okay, well, you're not much of a protector if you can't even perceive when someone's uncomfortable or like not happy about something. I mean, that's just being attuned to someone. So like, you just get this kind of sense that Louis Theroux is like, he's doming them. I don't know. There's probably a better word to use, but like he's essentially doming these men one after the other. And it's really interesting to see that, to see him just like, to see what it's like when these like sort of grown up man boys interact with like an actual man who's just like, very comfortable in himself and can't be, necessarily thrown off by, he can be surprised, and they this guy in particular like brings up things that I'll mention in a sec that sort of surprised Louis or whatever. But I just kept seeing time after time like, oh yeah, this is what it's like for these guys to interact with like a real like masculine man who's actually comfortable in himself. So, now criticism though, and I think it's the flip side of that in a sense, because that point that I was just making is sort of very like interpersonal and very micro level. Like you're seeing Louis Theroux on these in these interactions and how he presents as more confident than these men. And now these men are the ones being interviewed, so you could say that's obviously a huge factor. But regardless, I don't know, if you're being interviewed and you're confident in your life, like, okay, there's a little nerves, you're being interviewed by Netflix, but like, that's life. I don't know what to tell you. So, but I think the flip side of that micro level sort of like success, and the main reason I finished the film and I was like, wait, is that it? Is there's not sufficient macro level analysis at all. It's like, it reminded me of like, if you're talking about anti-vax people, you have to give the analysis of like, I get that pharma, like big pharma is a huge issue. Like, if you're talking about anti-vax people, you have to validate that point that big pharma is a huge issue, or else you seem like you're not really engaging, or you're like not doing justice to the reasons why people, one of the big reasons why people might be motivated to worry about vaccines. Now, it's very ironic because a lot of anti-vax people are not critical of the influence of private industry on our government generally. They're just very selectively take issue with when private industry influences government policy, or when lobbying exists. It seems very selective. Regardless, so Louis Theroux doesn't enough get into the basis for why people are motivated to seek out these Manosphere guys. He does interview some of the fans. So he does, but again, it's like micro level. I know it's a documentary and maybe you don't want to go into these presentations of facts about the world, but like, isn't that the point of a documentary, to give us a little bit of like the context also? So he interviews even like people who were formerly homeless, like people who are struggling and following these Manosphere guys. So he really does paint the picture of like, people follow these Manosphere guys because they're at a low place, because they're looking for meaning. You know, maybe they don't have a father figure. Maybe the Manosphere guys don't have a father figure like that. But again, that's sort of still micro level, you know? So the question is like, on the macro level, like, okay, I'll just say the point I really wanted them to make. Because like, this point that there's a matrix, that you're caught in the matrix and you can't get out of the matrix, and the matrix keeps you doing low-paid wage labor, and you can't actually pull yourself out of it. That's what these Manosphere guys are selling people. And I didn't like that Louis Theroux never made the point in the narration, as far as I remember, like never made the point of like, yeah, people are trapped in wage labor. Like that's really a key point. Like, yes, people are legitimately trapped in low-paying wage labor jobs at massive levels. Obviously, every individual hearing this can do things to improve their life. But on the whole, a lot of people, our economy demands a lot of people being stuck at jobs that have no future, that are underemploying them, and that are low paying, and that there's no way for these people to, for most people, or literally probably the majority of people, to improve their financial situation or their life in general, because they're stuck at jobs that are like a matrix, kind of pulling them in and making it very hard for them to leave. And they're dependent on a wage. We're dependent on a wage, and the wages, there's not enough good jobs to go around. And it's increasingly problematic. So I don't feel like that point was ever made. You know, I don't even know if the masculinity point about the role of a provider was necessarily made, but like, what was made at one point, Louis Theroux analogizes the matrix to the matrix of algorithms. That's at the end. It's like the big finish, I think. He's like, well, I guess the real matrix was the algorithms that's pushing these guys. But it's like, that's true, but that seems like not going far enough. I don't, like, my point about wage labor, like, you don't have to be like crazy left wing to be like, that's obviously the matrix. Like, they're literally saying in the film, like, the matrix is what keeps you stuck at your 9 to 5. So like, why is it even a jump to be like, oh, we're talking about how our economy makes people dependent on wage labor, and then there's not enough good jobs to go around? Like, is that not a very obvious point that should be made? I was like, how did they not make that point? Oh, the matrix is the algorithms. Okay, well then go maybe more into that. I don't know. They didn't really go into like what generates the algorithms. How do these for-profit companies, you know, what do we want to say about these for-profit companies like Netflix, by the way, and how they're operating in the sense of prioritizing money over everything else? And I'm not saying we should ask companies to be nicer. Obviously, the point would be like, what is it in our world that's making so many people, first of all, seeking this content, and then, you know, you don't need to like tell companies, hey, you can't, like, there doesn't need to be laws around, well, actually, I guess laws around algorithms are probably really complicated. I'm not going to pretend to know about like that. Obviously, there could be algorithms that break laws in how they function. I'm sure there have been legal cases about that, but I don't think it's necessarily important to legislate algorithms. Like, I don't, like, it's sort of like bringing up a problem that's really hard and mysterious for us to do anything about. Versus like wage labor, you could sort of push, hey, like, do you know about unions? You know, do you know about ways to make yourself more secure at your job by unionizing with other people? You know, is there more of a need for us to structure our societies in ways that don't make profit a central aspect of every single industry, in ways that then lead to people being exploited significantly by their jobs, which pay them only for a portion of the work that they do, and an increasingly small portion. And then they have to pay for housing and food that keeps going up in price. And ground rent keeps going up in price. Like, I just feel like some of these points would have really helped. Okay, and then, I'm not really sure why. Like, so this guy, whatever that he's interviewing right now, is kind of the central guy he interviews, and is being sort of like in between all their interviews, is being told by all his like little boy viewers about things about Louis Theroux, and so he's scared of Louis Theroux and stuff. And then he tries to like shock Louis Theroux or whatever. He keeps bringing up an interaction Louis had with I forget the guy's name. But and I didn't look into it, but I think there's some argument to be made that Louis Theroux like did a bad job in one of his past interviews. I honestly don't know the details. Let's just assume that he did a bad job with whatever the guy is that this guy keeps bringing up. I just want to say, at one point, this guy that he's interviewing brings up Israel because he accuses Louis Theroux of being, oh yeah, they're all anti-Semitic. You know, so they say all these negative things about Jews, and then they bring up Israel because anti-Semitic people love to associate Israel with Jews. It's something anti-Semitic people and Zionists have in common. One of the many things that they have in common. So they associate Jews and Israel. To them, they're like the same thing. They're really stupid. So they're like, well, Israel says they're a Jewish state, so I think they're a Jewish state. You know? Because that's how countries work. They get to just say what they are, and then we all have to agree with them. And that's true of every state that says they're an Islamic state. They truly are. They truly represent Muslims. Just like Israel truly represents Jews. I'm a baby, you know? That's sort of what I hear when people talk about this. But they have a lot of young boy fans. And young boy fans, especially if they don't know any Jews, which a lot of people don't know any Jews, they're like, oh, this is badass, you know? I'm bullying someone. I'm not being bullied. I'm bullying someone. That's kind of chill. You know what I mean? That's kind of dope, you know? And it's like, okay. As a Jewish person, I'm just like, okay. That doesn't lead to real confidence, you know? So it's just it's pathetic. I don't, you know, the anti-Semitism that I see is very pathetic. I don't know how these people don't realize they're actually supporting Israel when they express anti-Semitism. That feeds Israel. You're feeding the Israel machine. And if you actually cared about anti-Zionism, you would be able to separate it from anti-Semitism. It's not that difficult. Jews have existed for thousands of years. Zionism has existed for 150, I guess. So it's very easy to separate, but a lot of people, like, they're just a little bit not incentivized to do it. But so these guys say a lot of anti-Semitic stuff, and then this guy brings up Israel. He's saying, Louis, you're controlled by the Jews, and that's why you don't criticize Israel. And then he asks Louis, is Israel committing a genocide in Gaza? And Louis just doesn't answer and goes, well, you want my opinion? Yeah, dude. What is wrong with you, Louis? Like, you can't just say yes? Or you can't just say yes. International organizations that are extremely credible say that Israel's committing a genocide in Gaza. Like, why can't you say that? Is that not a key part of winning these interactions and getting these men into a tight spot? Why can't you use that leverage? Does Netflix not allow it? Why can't you say, yes, they're committing a genocide? What the hell, man? It's really disappointing for a lot of reasons. Like, it's your job to be truthful, and you drop the ball. You can't say that they're committing a genocide? Dude, it's pretty well documented, man. It's extremely, like you can credibly say that they're committing a genocide. You're not the first person to say that. You're not the first millionth person to say that who's credible. Like, it's international organizations actually have declared it a genocide. Why would you not say that when you're talking to an anti-Semite? Do you not understand? Well, Louis Theroux is not Jewish, by the way. And I have a sense like I don't know if he supports Israel, but I have a sense he might not fully understand anti-Zionist positions, because it's pretty obvious when an anti-Semite says to you, Israel's, well, why won't you condemn Israel? You condemn Israel. You say, I don't support what Israel's doing. They should not be a Jewish ethno-state. You know, most Jews who say they support Israel have been propagandized, and most people are changing their opinion fairly quickly as they become more informed, and it should obviously not be a Jewish ethno-state. No country should be an ethno-state. Jews don't need that. We should tackle anti-Semitism in other ways. We don't need Jews to all go to their own country. We don't need any country to be structured in that way. It does not lead to Jews' safety. It's not helpful for Jews, and it leads to the murder and displacement of millions of people. So it's really not that complicated to just say, yes, Israel's committing a genocide. It's been ruled as a genocide, and it will continue being ruled as a genocide. There's an open case about it. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's very clear. You can just say that. So Louis just loses his credibility. It is also very funny. Right. I'm glad I wrote this point down so I didn't forget to say it. It is very funny, though, to hear this guy, the buff guy, acting like he cares that Israel's committing a genocide. Because, why do you care about that? You care about people's rights. You care about human rights. Like the same guy that's been in this interview for over several different interviews, clearly saying like he doesn't care if what he does affects the world positively. At one point, Louis Theroux says, why don't you just try to have a positive impact on the world? And this guy goes, that's a good question. No, it's not. I love when people say that's a good question and it's not. It's like, no, he just asked you, why don't you consider doing good actions? Like, that's not a good question, dude. You should have thought of that one. So it's like he literally says, well, it's money. I want to succeed. You know, I promote OnlyFans models and then denigrate them to my viewership. I talk about how women don't deserve the same amount of rights. And then I talk about how much I love my mom. You know, I try to, get people to be, to be essentially abusive, towards, minorities and women. And Jews and so on. But I really don't like genocide because that infringes on people's rights. And I really care about people's rights. It's like, okay, you care about people's rights. We just watched you assault someone in the street because you thought they were a predator, a child predator. Like that, you do not understand that you can't just do that. That's vigilante violation of people's rights. Like we watched this guy assault someone in the street with his friends. And then, but he cares about Israel's genocide. It's just a hilarious idea that, well, this is the thing with anti-Semites. Like, it's obviously they can't actually criticize Israel. Because to be anti-Semitic that's tied in with denying people's rights. And believing that people are worse based on their identity, which is inherently connected to denying them rights. So how could you possibly care about Israel denying people's rights? It's hilarious. And maybe Louis could have pointed that out if he was not afraid to engage. So I blame Netflix, but also Louis Theroux. I mean, what the hell, man? And then last point about this documentary, this is very interesting. So there's one guy they visit, and this is art he has. And I was just like, okay. Okay. I'm an art guy. This is the guy that they're taught. This is the guy. He's like a big Trump Andrew Tate guy. And very, very bizarre character. You can really see, I mean, the documentary does a good job of showing you like these men and like what's really going on for them mentally and attachment wise. It's very clear that there's like serious attachment issues that are unresolved. I just thought this was a very interesting art piece. And let's get a zoomed in now, this is an art piece that this man Justin has in his house. We're now in his house, and the camera person just kind of is like, "What the heck?" So like, now I have no idea what I'm supposed to see in this image besides what I obviously see. You know, I don't know what Justin thinks this image is. I know what the artist thinks it is. I mean, I don't even... This is not something you could do. As a visual artist, you would have to be blind to not be intending on this looking like he is engaging with a penis in a sexual way, which is beautiful. That's a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful thing to do. It's something a lot of people get a lot of pleasure out of, both giving and receiving, and I'm all for it. I'm very sex positive. It's just a little surprising that this guy, and I wonder, like, what does his wife think? But you know, it's fine. Maybe they have an open situation, or maybe there's other stuff going on that I'm not aware of, and that's perfectly chill. I just thought it was kind of anachronistic, I guess, maybe. But it's kind of cool. It shows how, like, yeah, there's a lot of different ways that, you know. I don't know what to tell you here. Like, I'm really confused about what Justin thinks is going on in this image. But this is not the image segment, but I just had to kind of... Like, there's no way. Like, the background, you would need... Like, why? What is this? Like, obviously there is dots in the background. And look, you can tell the black paint is like added, you know, they painted it over, right? You can kind of tell like the black paint, the background is painted around the foreground, it seems like. So like, why wouldn't you just continue the background here unless you wanted to represent something here? I mean, it would be very like logical and obvious given everything about this composition and these circles in the background. You would expect this to just be a circle, but it's not. It has an extension here. And come on, yo, that is like 100%. It's kind of a beautiful piece. Don't get me wrong. Like it's a beautiful piece, and it's kind of interesting to show this man performing oral sex on a penis. I honestly think that's a very interesting artistic choice, and I think it says a lot about his artistic sensibilities that he's open to having that in his house. You know, I don't know if it's appropriate for the kids to see, but I don't remember their exact ages. I wouldn't want to, you know, see my dad doing that, but it seems a little, maybe this is a private room, you know, maybe it's a private room. So okay, that's Inside the Manosphere, and I'd recommend it. I wouldn't pay for Netflix to watch it, but yeah, it did just kind of end though, really, I felt like abruptly. I was like, oh, okay, that's the end. All right, well, I hate when things end abruptly.